Welcome. Scott here. I will be covering on the upcoming World of Illusions event, Divine Bahamut. The featured LD units for the event are Priush from Final Fantasy XI, Yuna from Final Fantasy X and Celis from Final Fantasy VI and Fran from Final Fantasy XII. All 4 characters will be getting their reworks and C90 awakenings. Priush's LD and BT will make their debut. Both Priush and Yuna's BT will be realizable. We will be fighting Bahamut Material, who has a whooping 60 million HP. The boss is immune to delays, which include delay from breaks, and turn deletion. It is also immune to the freeze debuff and debuffs that prevent action. The turn requirement for the fight is 70 and the HP requirements is 15,000. Before I continue further, here is a small disclaimer clause for the video. The guide is written based on the time that the event was released for the Japanese version. Please do note that it is possible that the boss fight mechanics might differ when the actual event is released in global. Firstly, let's go through the Lufania Plus orb conditions. The Lufania countdown ability Divine Gigaflare Plus is fatal. The orb will trigger at 3 HP thresholds where it will be cancelled temporarily. The orb won't be cancelled after the 29% HP thresholds. The orb will only downtick by 1 when Bahamut acts. In other words, if Bahamut don't act, the countdown ability will never get triggered. Here is a quick overview of the threshold triggers. The first threshold trigger will appear at the 89% HP threshold with 3 orb count. The orb will cancel once Bahamut's HP drops to 79%. The second threshold trigger will appear at the 59% HP threshold with 2 orb count. The orb will cancel once Bahamut's HP drops to 39%. The third and final threshold trigger will appear at the 29%. It won't be cancelable for the last trigger. The fight has an orb freeze condition. To freeze the orb, you need to do 2 consecutive HP attacks with the same character on Bahamut. There are a lot of characters who can do consecutive HP attacks. I won't go in depth on the recommendations. Instead, I will go in depth on how to make use of the condition if your team comp will be required to give Bahamut a turn. On the right side of the screen, you will see examples that will freeze the orb and examples that don't freeze the orb. Generally, you need to time your party's last turn with a character doing 2 consecutive HP attacks before Bahamut get its turn. Do note that calls or follow-up attacks that trigger in between the 2 consecutive HP won't fulfill the freeze condition. I will recommend you to save at least one of your burst or summon phase for the 29% HP threshold since it is technically a game over once Bahamut acts if you don't freeze the orb. Now let's proceed with some party setup recommendations. Recommended calls abilities. To ensure that you are able to constantly break them, it is important to inflict defense down debuffs. Example of calls abilities that inflict defense down calls are Ferris, Titus, Jack, and Vanille. The boss has a very big HP pool. Using HP damage up debuff calls like Karasame, Seymour, Lily-Set, Fran, Maria, Dark Knight Cecil, Gabrinth, and Ignis are useful. Aura-type HP damage calls like Leo, Alisai, Kamari, or Locke are very good for this fight. The Bahamut is immune to delay and delay from breaks. So, it is important to gain as much turns as possible before Bahamut could act. You can get with turn manipulation calls like Rains and Onion Knight. Rains LDCA is great for guaranteed launches for a burst phase. If you have Quistis LDCA, you can also use that for force delay to get more turns. Next, I will be covering units that will be useful to handle the fight mechanics. Like other Lufania Plus events, it is always recommended to bring supports for their aura and buffs. They are Garnet, Eiko, Ramza, Leela, Purim, Setzer, Agrias, Kate Sith, Queen, Ishtala, Bartz, Rem, Lyud, and Siren. Garnet, Siren, or Ramza BT Plus support will help with their powerful auras so that you could finish the fight a lot faster. If you don't want to play to the orb, you can bring Eiko for the fight. The fights have HP guaranteed hit attacks, thus, it is important to have Leela having her AA active throughout the course of the fight if you are using her. The fight features some mechanics that will resulting boss to have turns. Unless you are doing the full evasion strategy involving Leela, damage mitigation will make the fight a lot easier to ensure your party are safe from any stray HP attacks. Options include Snow, Core, Gladiolus, Warrior of Light, Beatrix, Auron, Zack, Guy, Bash, and Celis. Counter units like Gladio, Auron, Core, and Beatrix is very useful here for their off-turn damage as well. Celis is great for the fight as her traps can heals the party while she absorbs the boss magic brave attacks. Her S2 allows her to do an instant turn HP attack. Thus, you can follow up another HP attack for 2 consecutive HP attacks requirements to freeze the orb. Now let's focus on the key units that you could bring in for the fight. As I have mentioned earlier, you can freeze the orb if you do 2 consecutive HP attacks. Examples are Priush, Ishtala, Papalymo, Alisai, Ursula, Cid Rains, Machina, Tifa, Terra, Emperor, Aphma and Quistis. You can also make use of units with A that does HP attacks. For example, you can use Cloud with his A followed with his EX. As the boss have a massive pool of HP, off-turn damage is a great utility here. Other than the counter-tank options, you can considering bring trap units like Firion, Maria, the Emperor, Celis, Vanille, Ace, and Trey. Garnet and Core can also offer nice off-turn damage with their mechanics as well. In addition to the ones that I mentioned earlier, you can also consider to bring the following units. With Quistis, you can do boss no turns run with her force delay mechanics. Selphie is great for her rapture debuff and protect from her wall. You can minimize brave gains with Yuffie. Alternatively, you can drain the boss brave with sap or poison debuffs. Alpha Naught HP poison debuffs can be abused here for nice off-turn damage support as well. You can bring Noctis or Sisnei for their follow-up mechanics. However, do take note follow-up mechanics will disrupt your ability to freeze the orb. Turn manipulation units like Cid Rains, Aphma, and Rem are great for the fight as well. On the screen, you will see a timeline showing the HP thresholds triggers that you need to watch out for. The boss gains Lufania aura at the following thresholds: start of the fight and the 49% HP threshold. It is worth noting that the fight features heavy brave gain reduction auras. It will summon 2 Dragonstar Crystal. The one on its left or boss B specialize in attack while the one on its right or boss C provide their party with constant brave charges. Do note that the Vigor attack from the attack Dragonstar does a double single target HP attack which are guaranteed hit. The boss will activate the Dragon King's Providence at the following HP thresholds: 89%, 69%, 49%, 29%, and 9%. When the mechanic is activated, you will see a glowing aura emitting from the boss. During this time, the Brave of the Bahamut and Dragonstar crystals won't drop below 1% of their max Brave. The aura will dissipate after 10 player actions. It seems to last longer when the Bahamut acts. Bahamut has a recast ability Divine Gigaflare. It is a guaranteed hit, AoE Brave plus HP attack and applies a Brave sap that scales off Bahamut's current Brave. The sap effect will dispel after your party act 5 times. As mentioned earlier, the orb will appear and disappear at the certain thresholds. So, make sure you don't give the boss a turn when the orb is active. Every subsequent orb trigger will result the orb appearing with a lower orb count. Overall, this shouldn't be a tough fight if you have the tools to handle the fight. Bring some HP damage up debuffs as the boss have a massive HP pool to shred. Launches, follow-up attacks, turn manipulation or force delay from Quistis are some utilities that you can look to bring for the fight. Be careful if you are bringing follow-up utility as it will result you unable to freeze the orb. Thus it is best to do boss no turns if you intend to bring follow-up attackers for the fight. Now let's proceed with the boss mechanics proper. Like the previous Lufania Plus fights, the boss will gain big stats boosts, brave damage, and brave gain reduction auras when you deplete their HP to a certain threshold. The thresholds trigger for this fight is at the start of the fight and 49% thresholds. At the start of the fight, it will boost all its defense by 50%. At 49% HP threshold, it will further boost its defense to 100%. The maximum Brave damage reduction auras is 50%. The maximum Brave gain reduction auras are 90%. To handle the defense stats boost, you can inflict defense down calls. To handle the Brave gain and Brave damage reduction auras, you can use Brave damage up debuffs like Jack, Sephiroth, or deploy a support with Brave damage up like Lena. Rem and Quistis is an example of a few supports that provide Brave gain up. Rem works well for the fight thanks to her turn manipulation utility. Quistis can delay Bahamut's turn with her force delay mechanics. This will allows you to pummel the Bahamut in peace. Now let's look into key boss mechanics. Let's start off with Bahamut's partner in crime, the Dragonstar Crystal. They will be summoned to the battlefield at the start of the fight. They are immortal to HP attacks as they will heal whatever HP damage you dealt to them. At certain HP thresholds, Bahamut will activate its Dragon King's Providence auras. Upon activation, the Dragonstar Brave cannot drop below 1% or 999. From what I am seeing from boss no-turn fights, the aura will dissipate after 10 player actions. However, if Bahamut acts, it will prolong the effect. Boss B, the Dragonstar attack or the crystal that is on Bahamut's left, has guaranteed hit attacks. Do watch out for Vigor, which is a single target double HP attack. Boss C, the Dragonstar support or the crystal that is on Bahamut's right, provides Brave battery for their party with Brave charge that scales off the crystal's current Brave. To avoid the boss from gaining too much Brave control abilities like Kater's Freeze, Wakka's Freeze Reels or Arcela LD debuff or traps like Maria, Celis, and Ace are useful utility that you can consider. As long as you keep their Brave under control, you don't need to worry too much about them. Here is another slide to recap on the Lufania orb triggers. The first threshold trigger will appear at the 89% HP threshold with 3 orb count. The orb will cancel once Bahamut's HP drops to 79%. The second threshold trigger will appear at the 59% HP threshold with 2 orb count. The orb will cancel once Bahamut's HP drop to 39%. The third and final threshold trigger will appear at the 29%. It won't be cancelable from this point forward. To freeze the orb, you need to have a unit ending the party turns doing 2 consecutive HP attacks. You can refer to the examples shown on the screen. The Bahamut have a certain attack cycle. It will start off with Megalfair, a guaranteed hit, Brave gain, AoE Brave plus HP attack. Next, it will follow up with Homing Ray where it does a Brave gain, AoE Brave attack that inflicts 80% initial Brave down debuff for 5 turns. Next, it will follow up with Tear Breath, which is an AoE Brave attack that inflicts 3 turn defense down. Next it will follow up with Flare, which is a single target Brave attack. After this, the cycle resets back to Mega Flare. If its recast gauge is filled, Divine Giga Flare will take priority over the next skill in its rotation. Divine Giga Flare is a guaranteed hit AoE Brave attack that applies Brave Sap Field effect. The Sap effect scales off Bahamut's current Brave. The field effect will dissipate after you have accumulated 5 party actions. We have come to the final slide of the guide. Here is a survival toolkit summary of the utility that you need to take note of when doing the fight. 1. Damage mitigation. The fight features lots of HP attacks and the dangerous ones are usually guaranteed hits. Damage mitigation is important here to prevent any stray attacks. One of the featured units, Celis, is very good for this fight. Other than damage mitigation, you can consider bring units with party-wide last stand, overheals, or traps that could assist off-turn healing. I have them listed on the utility box that is on the left of screen. If you are bringing Leela for this fight, make sure you have her AA active throughout her turns. 2. Controlling the boss Brave gains. The boss is immune to the freeze debuff and will reach an unbreakable state when it activates the Dragon King's Providence auras. To survive the fight, it is important to keep their brave under control. The Dragon Star support will constantly charging the party brave pool. You can make use of sap or poison debuffs. Or you can consider one of the following characters that I listed in the utility box to control the boss brave. 3. Traps and off-turn damage. The boss is immune to delay, include delay from breaks. Thus, they are bound get its turn unless you use turn manipulation or force delay. Traps can control their brave gains are very useful here. Units like Firion, Maria, and Celis are great for the fight thanks to the off-turn healing from their traps triggers. 4. Turn manipulation. When the Lufania orbs is activated, you need to maximize the number of turns you can act before the Bahamut get its turn. Turn manipulation utility can help a lot for the fight. The infamous Sidma should work pretty well here. If you have Quistis with her LD, she can enable boss no turns with her force delay mechanics. Combine it with potential nuking utility like having a follow-up attack like Sasnii or guaranteed launches with Kaisa's hero support or Selpha's Rapture. Snowverflow is also great here and Quistis pairs pretty well with Snow for the fight. With this, we have come to the end of the boss guide. Thank you for watching the video. If you like the video, please do give the video a like. Please do subscribe to my channel for future similar content. Good luck for the fight in the coming days. Bye.